Today we are talking about the command and control center that cannot go dark. And so this is mission critical AV. So Marcus, we've talked a little bit about different segments that you guys serve, and each one of them has their different components. So whether it's corporate, medical, universities, they all have their different components. And command and control centers like 911 dispatch, emergency operations centers, things like this, they have their own unique requirements and the ways that you guys would set up their AV. So I want to talk a bit about that because it's life-saving context. So it's very important to get the AV right, and it's very important to have an expert like you that can get into the technical components of it and match the dreams with reality, like we talk about a lot. So first, before we start, define a command and control center. What is that, and how do you guys, think about the different segments within that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think command and control, we are thinking your monitoring stations and really high profile, lots of displays, lots of computer systems all running at the same time. So if you think about your television shows, you have your wall full of screens and maybe 5 to 10 folks sitting at various stations. They're doing something, who knows? But you're just monitoring different systems, live feeds, camera feeds, and in some cases, things from all over a building, all over a town, all over the city. It could be nationwide in the event of, catastrophic storms or anything like that. So that's, typically what you think of, similar to a network operating center where you're monitoring a network. Same concept. These are spaces that, they're typically running 24/7. It could be fielding calls. They could be listening to, walkie-talkie conversations for folks in electrical, working on lines, all these things happening at the exact same time. And you have to really have visuals that allow you to make a quick decision if you need to about what's happening in the space.
Okay, so the speed for the folks to operate and make decisions is really important, and the constant runtime, 24/7, is an important component of that. So what do you think is the most fundamental difference between that and some of these other contexts that you serve within the kind of AV installation that you do?
Yeah, so in these spaces, people say 24/7, they think casually about it sometimes. No, they're legit 24/7. One crew comes in, one crew goes out. This is not the same as your typical university classroom or a middle school or high school classroom or even a corporate huddle space or anything like that. A lot of those spaces, they're not used 24/7. First and foremost, you have working hours, you have classroom hours, things like that, typically during the daytime. So you're operating from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So as you think about it, you don't necessarily need the critical 24/7 hardware. So that's an immediate difference right away, right? We're talking about spaces that are literally running 24/7, 365 versus your typical spaces that maybe they get 8 hours of use a day. And that's a maybe. Sometimes they're even less than that. So there's that part going on. And there's so many signals when you talk about command control, because typically any workstation at any point in time needs to be viewed. When you talk about a typical classroom or a executive space, anything like that, there's usually one source, maybe two. Maybe I have a camera, maybe I have a laptop or someone's going to share, wireless sharing. Those things are pretty straightforward. It's a one-to-many, right? One source to main displays. Even if you get into the higher education segment, when you're doing group-based learning, and you have pods, right? You're still doing small breakouts, but again, it's not necessarily critical decision-making. It's not critical, and it's also not the time investment of, hey, this still is running at 1 a.m. It's not happening in those environments. So that's the big drivers of what we see to differentiate between those spaces.
How do you, I imagine because of that 24/7 operation, you got to have really good redundancies in place. Like anytime you've got something that's just on constantly, if that goes dark, something else has got to pick back up, like at a hospital with a generator. How do you guys think about that when you're designing and implementing spaces like these?
Funny enough, we actually recommend a similar backup system for everything we put in. So before we go, off on just command and control, at the end of the day, AV is a collection of purpose-built PCs, right? That's one of the ways I encourage people to think about this. If you have a desktop in your house, are you just going to go unplug it at any point in time, or are you going to try to safely shut it down? Most folks, I know there's some out there, I live with one. She doesn't care about unplugging, a PC. She's not losing any sleep over that. But typically, you don't want to do a hard power outage on a computer. Should it restore itself? Sure. Could it not come back? It could not come back. So typically, our baseline is to say, hey, we should have a UPS on everything, uninterruptible power supply, right? Because you don't want a box to have a failure and not come back not only does it not come back, or does it not come back in the correct order. Sometimes the order of restoration does matter. So once we get into the command and control side, we treat it as mandatory, because we'll say, hey, every single system we have on this UPS, it's not going to run forever, but in those milliseconds between maybe the generator kicking in and, having a power event, this way we can make sure that that equipment is being supplied at the proper voltage. There's no spikes, because you don't want, a box to fail in this environment. Well, all of a sudden you need an immediate replacement. It's 1:00 in the morning. You may not be able to get our support team unless you have a special contract. And then do we make sure we have those replacements? So when we start talking about, just power backups, that's the starting point. And then from there, we keep a couple of displays on hand. If something should happen to a display that fails, maybe it got cracked, anything happens, we make sure we have what we call hot swappable, spares for everything. So maybe we have to replace a display, or maybe we, replace an encoder or decoder or some other component of that system. So those are the big things. I mean, you can't have something go down and then just say, oh, well, it's going to be down for about a week while we wait for the replacement. So in those environments, we typically will stock, the backup parts and pieces to make sure that space is still up and running.
That's a lot of the hardware side. Is there similar kind of redundancies and ways that you think about on the software side? Any kind of, operating systems, or how you guys think through that kind of thing?
Typically, everything we do for command and control is going to be hardware-based versus software-based. So there is software running, right? There's in a DSP, a digital signal processor, so it's an audio component. There's a file that runs. We back up everything. So we have copies of every single file. A lot of these places, there's only so much you can do as far as cloud-based backups, because in sensitive locations, you're not getting on the internet. You're not getting access to the outside world. A lot of these systems need to be standalone and completely segregated from anything else. We have several sites we operate, and that's how they function, especially when you get into military sites. There are hard restrictions about how you can communicate and what is allowed to touch any network. So what we end up doing is, for every site like this, every piece of code that drives any system, we automatically have a backup. If we have to deploy, we automatically take it with us. So we have a great system in place that allows us to really keep track of versioning, updates that are changing. We have all that in real time, firmware, and you don't really store it on site. There's some new devices coming out that will allow you to store the firmware right there in the box, and we're investigating those. But typically our number one rule is, as soon as we make a modification or we push code, we have it stored in our repository. So once we get to site, we'll have our own wireless access points so we can get back to our own systems and make sure we can grab copies and downloads. But we also share that with the owner. So we say, hey, we'll have a copy and you have a copy. So there's redundancy in where it's being stored.
Who knew that America's critical infrastructure is backed up by people like Marcus and his team at Contech, just backing up files and code and the firmware and all that? That's okay. I never thought, I don't know. I never thought about it. That's amazing.
It's all about speed, right? Because you don't want it to go down, but you have to also prepare for it to fail. And so in the planning stages, you're always planning, okay, if this fails, what do we do? What is going to be the first step? How do you restore it as fast as possible? Because again, you can't just be down casually for a week in some of these places.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, how do you think about, so we talked about the hardware and the software and redundancy and things like that, but how do you think about where the actual people are sitting in the room, in the screens that they have, or the lighting, they're kind of, call it operator performance. How do you make sure that they are performant so that they can actually make the decisions based on their AV technology?
So this will be a throwback back to our standards episode, but standards are critical and they matter, and they need to be talked about in the beginning of the project. So if you ever watch, television shows like your NCIS shows, or, all of them, they're all in their monitoring stations and they have the wall full of displays. I would say think about it logically, but a lot of times AV is not logical to most people. So I'd say if you think about it with a critical eye for AV, all right, I have a wall. This wall is 30 feet long. Okay, well, if I'm sitting and I'm positioned to the far left, can I see what's on the far right? Probably not. So this is when you really have to lean in on, okay, what size display do we need? How much brightness? If it's a dark room, you don't want to burn out retinas or give people fatigue or anything like that. So you don't need 1,000 nits of brightness coming off a display in a room that's dark. Now, maybe if you have a lot of windows, a lot of ambient lighting, right, then you would do something like that. But it's critical to understand where are people sitting, where are they looking, what displays do they need access to, and then also how do they interact with this control system? Is it, all controlled from a manager or a director station? We have lots of setups that do that. One manager controls the layout. They'll grab feeds from each individual workstation, put them up. We have other users where they say, hey, we want each individual user in the event they need to have the ability to throw it from their own computer to the displays. Okay. And so those are actually different things as far as the layouts and how we run it and how we control it. But all of that has to be talked about. How do we deal with sound? What are we listening to? Is the sound coming through speakers and everyone hears the same thing? Do we need isolated sound? Am I listening through headphones? And then we've got some more even advanced spaces where they want conferencing also built into the monitoring. Well, that goes into a lot of work with, echo cancellation and how do you localize this? Where are the cameras placed, right? How does a camera see the correct person speaking? So there's really a lot that goes into it, but it starts with understanding how does the center actually function, right? How do they function? How do you work? What's the floor plan? Where are they sitting? And simple things, right? How are we getting cables from A to B? Is it a raised floor? Are there floor boxes? Like what is happening in the space from a construction standpoint? So all of that is what you really think about, again, before you really draw the first, system flow is really, all right, what does this look like? What are the physical limitations of the space? I see so many spaces where if AV is not thought of in the very beginning, I see rooms that may be 8 feet tall. Like, hey, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. We're not going to be able to do much with display height in a room that's only 8 feet tall. This is not a good room for the application. Can we make something work? Sure. But now you're trying to make accommodations or you're making all these trade-offs from the very beginning of the project. So a lot of what has to be focused on is really the physical aspects of the room, understanding the seating plan, the layout, and then also understanding the workflow. And then you start, working through iterations of technology and ideas.
There's this term that people use called cognitive load. And I imagine people in this kind of setting having to make these decisions as fast as they're having to make decisions, whether it's weather related or medical or whatever it might be. Does that factor into your design and the kind of things that you recommend? Is the sense of like, we're trying to reduce their cognitive load so they can see everything that they need to see and make the decisions they need to make as fast and as easily as possible. Is that something that you guys think about?
Absolutely. This is a case where you absolutely need the system to be, I hate to say simple because that understates kind of what happens because there's some complexity to this, right? There's going to be a level of complexity to these types of systems just because of how many inputs and outputs and routing and windowing and all the things. But at the core of it, you need people to be able to see the information. And the example I'll give is during a hurricane. If you're in a monitoring system, there are multiple feeds that are going to be monitored every single time. How do we get that screen as fast as possible? I don't want to have to hit 4 buttons to get this on screen. I need to be able to just grab the content, send it, everyone can see it, everyone can hear it. And, max, maybe 2 to 3 button presses max to make that happen. Because again, I don't want someone having to fumble with, okay, I have to hit here, and then I swipe here, and then I scroll here. Okay, now I'm ready. If it's a critical situation, you don't have time for that kind of, it's wasted energy on decision making. Every single decision you have to make is just pulling from your energy.
We've talked about before how simplicity is elegant, of course, but to achieve that elegance is actually a ton of hard work. It's way easier to make it more complex and finagle it with a bunch of buttons and all that, but to make the thing that you need as quickly as possible, one button, one move, it's actually really hard to do. That's the hardest part.
It is. We love to call it presets. It's like, okay, how many presets can we do? And I mean presets for it'll control the audio level, the displays, what content is being shown. It's like, okay, emergency preset, you hit it and everything just goes for you. So there's nothing else to do.
So when you're thinking about designing this, at the very beginning, we always talk about, call us early. Let's talk about this dream way before you're going to be, starting to design and implement it. Who are the kind of people that need to be in that room? The room where it happens. I just watched Hamilton live. It was really great. But the song In the Room Where It Happens. Who are those people that need to be there? What kind of people are you talking to? The stakeholders, trying to get everybody together to make the decisions and make that come reality. Who is that?
Yeah. So first and foremost, IT, right? We got to know the rules. We got to know the connections. We have to know what's allowed and what's possible. So IT has to be there. Most importantly, I'd say also your manager and a few of your operators, whoever is the dispatch operator, manager, whoever controls that room, if they're going to be doing routing, they need to be in the discussion. We've got to know, what are you looking at? What are your feeds? What are your sources? How do you need to manipulate them? What do you need to hear? So they're the only folks typically that can tell you how they actually work every day and what they need to have happen. I always say the money people are important, but sometimes they may get in the way of the functionality. Great to have them there because, they may say, hey, you only have this much budget. okay, well then we have to figure out, can we compromise on the functionality or not? Those are the key folks to be involved. And then after that, facilities, anyone related to construction, if you're doing something brand new, they have to be in the play. But I'd say the core of a system like this, you have to talk to the operators, right? You have to talk to the operators that are at each workstation. You have to talk to whoever has the manager station. And then also, like I said, facilities and IT. Everyone's got to be working hand in hand to make sure we capture all of the needs and that we can get this functionality to work. Plus, if there are any restrictions or anything that are off limits, that's when IT can tell us, like, no, you can't do this. You can't touch this part of the network. Or, no, we have to have it on the network because we need to monitor every single thing they're doing at all times, for security purposes. It can go either way. So they have to be in the conversation early on versus trying to come in late and now make a lot of changes or switch networks or reassign IP addresses. And it's just wasted effort at that point.
And I imagine on the the preset discussion, making decisions simple, the actual operators thinking like, okay, how do you actually use your keyboard or your displays or the things that are coming in? Like I imagine like literally getting nitty gritty Monday through Friday. What are you actually doing? That's a really important part.
Yeah, it is. And it's one of those things where, this will get into the weeds of our decision making. We always talk about hardware based versus software based. But I have a joke with folks. I say, hey, software based is cool. And they're like, oh, I can do anything. Yes, but do you need to do anything? What are the things you need to do in this system? We see so many times where people make decisions and everyone wasn't consulted or they didn't really understand what they were getting. We know of a solution right now that's in place. It's being replaced after 18 months. And some of the feedback we got was it never worked correctly. There was always an issue. I think I went to visit and one of the displays wasn't working. And I was like, they are monitoring things all the time. How frustrating would that be that every single week there's some random issue? And it's one of those cases where I also tell folks, we're a technology company. We're in the technology sector. It's changing all the time. You want to be innovative. You want to be, cutting edge and understanding what's coming, but that has its place. And in these rooms where it's mission critical and it has to work all the time, that's not necessarily where you want to be on the bleeding edge of technology, right? You want something that is robust, it's technologically sound, and it's got to be bulletproof. You've got to know that when you're putting it together, it is going to work every single day. You may have a random failure, and again, they're computers. It's going to happen. But you don't want to get, calls every day because something crashed, something's offline, and we can't bring it back. Again, you're damaging their ability to do the job correctly. And that's why I tell folks, yes, we love new toys. Everyone does. Who doesn't love new toys? But at the same time, there's time and a place. And when it's mission critical, that is neither the time nor the place.
This may not make sense to you, but as you're talking, what I'm thinking about is the debate with Teslas and your kind of standard car, if I could call it that, where it's got buttons and dials and all that kind of stuff. But then a Tesla is just a big screen. And there's a big debate about like, I actually like just reaching over and turning a dial for my temperature because I'm adjusting it so much. I don't want to click a bunch of buttons and go to different screens and do all this kind of stuff. Is it kind of like that where it's like, I want the tactical, I want the buttons, I want the thing to work. I just need to like move. I don't want all the screens, all the fancy stuff.
Yeah, it's similar because again, we're building a room that's nothing but screens. So, but the concept is similar. Well, yeah, right?
Of course.
I need things where I can push them. Yeah, I can push this really quickly. And slight tangent, I'm a button guy, right? Don't give me much touch screens in the car. I want a touch screen in my office. I don't want a touch screen in my car. Not really. I want some knobs. Okay. I like knobs. They're fine. I know where they are.
I'm a knob guy. What can I say?
Keep my eyes on the road. Yeah, I can keep my eyes on the road that way. The mission is to get from A to B, so I keep my eyes on the road. But it's very, very similar, right? You don't want to overcomplicate these systems because again, at the core, I'm displaying information. I need it to happen immediately. I need to be able to switch quickly, and I need to make sure users have a level of comfort in what they're doing, so that once they see it, is it intuitive? Does it just make sense to them? If I have to read a 5-page manual to operate the system, I'm already losing that battle. Like I've already lost. This was a bad design. This is not going to work. So we want to make sure that it should feel intuitive. With more power and more control, there will come a need for a little bit more advanced training or a little bit more that we hide in pages, right? Oftentimes we have technician pages. That's what we call them. And it's a hidden page within operating system, a touch panel, so that the really advanced folks can now get in here and make, really slight changes or more advanced changes versus your day-to-day operators. I just need these things on screen really quickly. So that's the things you kind of plan for and you expect. But yeah, you don't want to overcomplicate those systems at all. You don't want too many widgets on your touch panel and all this crazy stuff that a person can't find what they need to get something on screen.
Related to that, what are some other maybe common mistakes or things that you see in this industry regarding their AV that, if they could just mitigate these three things, or maybe if I knew this, 10 years ago in this space, I would have avoided this, and this, or my experience, I've seen this happen. Is there anything like that that comes to mind that you wish people would just know more about this kind of work?
Yeah, I'd say mission critical as far as getting things right. Don't go in with a budget, right? And I know dollars matter. We stress this all the time. Dollars do matter. But if someone just throws out a random budget, you're almost guaranteed to have a problem, right? I don't care if it's a high number, low number, whatever's going on. It's mission critical to actually listen to the needs, perform an analysis, put together these thoughts and ideas, and let that drive the budget conversation. Because then if you have to pull back, fine, but at least you started at the right point and you've captured everything. Because it's terrible when you're trying to band-aid a system and trying to bolt things onto it and the functionality is never quite right, or it's not quite as stable as it should be. I'd say that's, first and foremost. I tell users, bring an expert with you. If you're going to have a demo from someone, demos are great. Don't get me wrong. I like demos. But at the same time, some users get caught up in the bells and whistles of the demo versus the actual functionality and the stability of it. We've seen, like I just mentioned, systems that they've only been running for like 18 months, but they had to consistently reboot and all these things are happening. And then when we go in to see them, they're like, oh, this is completely software based. Like I saw a system, it's being run by like 20 nooks. Like, well, maybe it works somewhere, but I don't know that this is the right place for that. And they consistently have problems. So we're big fans of making sure we understand what is the technology you're trying to buy into and why, right? Because it's not just about the technology for technology's sake. It's about what is the function the technology is going to provide for you, and is that in alignment with how you do your work, or how you need to do your work, or where your work is going. If it's not there, then why are you spending money on that? So a lot of caution as far as understanding bells and whistles, and then it's just construction. If you're building a new space, let's make sure we talk about and understand, how are cables getting from point A to point B? Seems really simple. I can't tell you how many projects we look at it and we're like, hey, where's the conduit? How are we supposed to run cabling? Like, I've got to go 50 feet to the right. How am I going to get there? So I can't tell you how many times, the infrastructure isn't caught early enough. And nobody wants to go back and core drill or rip out a wall or open up a ceiling or any of those things. But mission critical to really understand, again, how are we working? Where are we working from? Where are the spaces? What's the furniture layout? Like, how does this room look? Now let's go ahead and talk about infrastructure, because it should always be captured early. So those are the biggest ones I think I would go with as far as, getting it right the first time.
Interesting. I want to go back to the budget point. That's a really interesting point. I mean, obviously it's easy to say, like, don't come on with a budget. Like all bets are off. And you say, like, no, of course budgets are extremely important, but so like go more there. Cause like, obviously before anybody builds any kind of building or designs a space, there's obviously going to be like some number in mind. They put it on the spreadsheet, the financial model to make it work. How do you have that conversation? Who do you talk to? And at what stage are you talking to that person? Because like, I can imagine a CFO or a private equity firm that's building something, and you say, don't worry about the budget right now. I'm fascinated, like, how that conversation happens. Like, tell me more about that.
I really say it just like that too. But honestly, what a lot of this is, there's a process, right? And we work with architects on this all the time. Feasibility studies. Normally you'll see it for a really large project. The concept can be applied to any project, because what you want to do is, can this work? Will the things we want to accomplish work in the space? Whether it's a retrofit, a renovation, or a brand new construction site, those are discussions you want to have, because once you do that and you bring that team together to do the study, they can start to do, early stage budgets. They'll be rough, right? They're just meant to get you in the ballpark, but they give you a real idea of what the project costs. We see that some new buildings going up sometimes around various places, might be $150 million. No one just threw that number out there. It's really from studying, working through, programming, understanding what's happening, right? So I'd say that should be the first phase, is whoever it is, if it's CIO, CFO, whoever's coming together to say, hey, usually the CEO has this vision. Okay, let's bring a team together and let's figure out, what is the cost? Let's make sure we capture all of it, all of the vision, so that way we can get a true idea of the cost. And then let's start there with the budget. If I just come in and, hey, Tom down the street said he did a project like this and it was $100,000. Okay, great. That really doesn't mean anything because we haven't heard what is the vision for the space. We don't know what it is. Maybe what you're doing is going to be $75,000. Maybe it's going to be $1 million. But start there, right? And then let that drive your budget. And then you can decide what's the most important thing. What are the critical things versus the needs versus the wants. And that's typically how I have the discussion. Like, hey, or if someone just tells me, well, we have this budget. Well, how'd you come up with that? That's usually my first question. Oh, how'd you get that budget? If you did a study, okay, I'm all there. If you say, well, we just kind of guessed at it, like, hey, let me prepare you right now that may be incorrect. Let's just go ahead and get it out of the way. So you won't have sticker shock once I've heard what you have to say about the space. Because oftentimes there is a disconnect between reality and, what someone hopes something costs. And it's not always, I don't want to pin it on the end user because in our industry and in the world, at any point in time, global supply chains can be impacted by something happening. Various things can happen with suppliers. And next thing you know, your costs are going up and up and up. And, since COVID, it seems like prices have increased almost every year. There's been something. If you look around right now, there's a memory shortage, right? There's stress for and strain for hard drives and memory modules. And people think, oh, computer prices are high. No, everything is high because everything's a computer now. So all of that trickles down into what you're paying for. So it's just important to help folks understand how budgeting should work. Get in there early. Like I said, if you do a full feasibility study, great. But even if not, have someone work on a rough order of magnitude budget for you. If all I'm doing is upgrading my AV system, any partner should be able to look at what you're doing, listen to you, and say, hey, you're going to need to spend about this much to get what you want.
You mentioned memory chip shortage. The demand, of course, driving a lot from AI models and data centers and so on and so on. This may be a silly question, but do you think Claude or ChatGPT can help you create a good budget for a good AV space if you give it some good specs? Like, what's your take on that?
Maybe. We're experimenting with it. It's really about your prompting. Like, can you get the right prompts? Can you train it enough? Because, a lot of folks lose sight of the fact that no, LLMs, AI, whatever you want to go by, they're not all knowing. It only knows what it's been trained on. A lot of AI that we've seen hasn't really been trained on our particular industry. Now it's getting there. We see more and more companies working on it, and there's some really cool things happening right now with programming and things like that. But it's hit or miss. It's close sometimes, but really on the back end, can you feed it enough information to train it? And then it may be able to drive a budget. But where it gets tricky is, can it link your needs exactly? And can you prompt it correctly with your needs to actually get the correct number you're looking for? Because we've seen a few examples where it's wildly inaccurate. But it goes back to, okay, did I feed it the right information? Did I know enough about the system that I could actually prompt it correctly to then get an output that made sense?
That's what we've always said. It's the expertise going into the model with not. It's almost like, I don't need the answer. You need the right question, and that takes expertise. That takes you guys been doing this for 30 years. That is the only way you could get the right answer out of some kind of AI model, probably. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you take everything you learn and then let it enhance your workflow. If you have no idea about AV and you just say, hey, I need AV in my conference room, I mean, good luck. You get all kinds of wild answers. But what I have seen is sometimes it's a great tool to find companies that do what you're looking for, right? They can do that really well. Can search do that? Sure. But I think AI may be able to give deeper dives and tell you more about companies that it's learning via the web or however to get you more information or better information. But right now, like I said, if a user just guesses at it, it's like, good luck, man. I don't know that it has enough knowledge accumulated to give you a correct answer. Maybe one day, though, keep working on it.
You never know. Any other final summaries, advice, recommendations on folks that are, kind of either thinking about building a new command and control center or revamping the one that they have? Maybe these folks that are 18 months in, putting in a new replacement. Any kind of recommendations you would have for them other than what you said?
Yeah, this is where it's mission critical. When you say mission critical, then you should link that in your mind to commercial, right? Not light commercial, light duty, absolutely not consumer. And my favorite conversations are always, well, I can go to the store down the street and I can get that same display for $1,500. And I'm always a quick, no, you cannot. It's not the same. It looks the same. It looks the exact same, not the same internals. And when you're talking about command and control, that's not the time. If it's really critical, right, and only the user can tell you if it's critical or not, it's not the time to try to cut down to the cheapest, lowest common denominator for the pricing. Because at the end of the day, especially in our space, you'll get what you pay for. If you try to get the $500 computers and $200 monitors, you shouldn't be surprised when you're running them for 15, 18, 24 hours a day that they burn out, sooner, they fail sooner, because they're not meant for that and they're not rated for that. So if it's really critical, then your budget needs to reflect that. And your mindset of how you think about the equipment should also reflect that if it's critical. If it's not, then, you have other options available to you. But that's my biggest takeaway probably for anyone in that space, which is also the importance of don't come in with a make-believe budget. Make sure you spend some time, do some research, bring in a trusted professional, and actually price this thing correctly so you know what you're getting into.
I got to say, you have changed my mind. The other day, I was at the airport and I needed to buy a cable because my little cord was fraying or something. And so I went up to one of those stores in the airport and I'm looking at this cable and it's the Apple one and it's $35, which is crazy to me because it's just a little cord. But you were in the back of my head of like, no, get the good cable because it'll save you so many headaches in the future. And I bought it. I spent $35 on this little 1 meter charging cable when the other one was $10 because of you. And I'm even making these recommendations now to folks that are, doing kind of video work like this of just like, yes, go to the Apple store and pay $80 for the Thunderbolt 5 cable or whatever, because it's going to save you headaches in the future. So you are changing minds one conversation at a time. And I really appreciate it.
Well, good. And I also live it, right? I don't just throw it out there in the world. I have USB-C cables. Some I've had for a few years now, and they were expensive when I got them. But the whole thought was, hey, I want this to last. I want to make sure I can, because specs change sometimes and things get enhanced, and with Thunderbolt 5 coming and all these things. But literally, my cables, I still can use most of them because I invested in them from the get-go. So I don't just say it, I live it. It's how I go about my own cable purchasing and anything like that for my own setups.
Amen. Well, Marcus, thank you for changing all of our lives, one cable at a time, one conversation at a time.
One cable at a time.
That's right. If anybody listening or watching is interested in more resources like this, we have tons more resources on contek.com. That's KONTEK.com. And I encourage you to get in touch with Marcus and the team, and they will help you buy the best cable possible to help your mission critical AV needs. Marcus, thank you so much. Enjoy the conversation as always. We will see you on the next episode.